All right, so the Kennedy assassination has such a wide range of topics that it's hard to begin or set with any each one. But I suppose for this video, we're going to talk about the biography of Lee Harvey Oswald as established by the federal government and independent researchers, and what I came to determine about him from what I've learned. So one of the weirdest things about Oswald was that he was a out and out an outspoken communist in the middle of the Cold War era, when not even the liberal Democrats would have self-ascribed themselves as a communist. Now, it wasn't unheard of for that type of person to have a point of view in the United States. We had even communist organizations that were still active in the United States at the time. But it was very improbable for someone of Oswald's background to go back and forth between the United States and the Soviet Union without, garnering up the attention of, stirring up the attention of some of our various intelligence and law enforcement agencies. And it was also weird for him to have that point of view to begin with. So one thing I did when I came to accept that, you can read about Oswald and find pertinent facts. It's not a cover-up where everything is completely a lie. That was one of the initial suppositions I had in going into this. I used to think, well, what facts can we trust if the government has manufactured everything? Well, anyway, the big curiosity of mine is, how did Lee Harvey Oswald become a communist, and what attracted him to the liberal ideologies? And from what I gathered, Oswald was a little kid at the time of the Rosenberg executions, when the Rosenberg couple was executed by Eisenhower, the Eisenhower administration, and on direct endorsement of Eisenhower for leaking nuclear secrets to the Soviet Union. They were a couple that were executed. So Oswald appears to have been attracted to the espionage aspect of our Cold War situation. At some point, it's hard to ascertain and fully declare what his actual views were. But when he went into a military career, hoping to gather some, reasonable military experience and possibly find out secrets, because that's when he went to the Soviet Union. He tried to offer them, I know radios, I can tell you things that we did over here. So he was trying to find information that he could leak. He was always approaching different organizations, even on the right and left, offering to put up his services towards some illicit game. So he Oswald, I think, in my point of view, I believe Oswald saw himself as a double agent, possibly maybe even a Soviet-leaning double agent, but he was attracted to that kind of secret agent man lifestyle, which is why I think he predominantly started to be interested in communism. Now, there's a lot of things said about Oswald and his military training and what he was or was not qualified for, but one of the strange facts that keeps coming up is the fact that he failed Russian, even though he took Russian language courses. But while he supposedly failed Russian in the military, he spoke good enough Russian that his wife thought he was a Russian. And I guess if it was true that he failed Russian, that might be a little bit of a failure on our testing, our military testing, on account of the fact that Russia is such a large, broad country that and it's part of its ideology is that you accept people from all different areas and they become Russian. So I think it's very easy to get along with even a Yakov Smirnoff type of accent, which by towards the end of his life, Oswald sounded like Yakov Smirnoff. I mean, his accent, his acquired Soviet accent, would have fooled a casual listener, because he didn't sound right. He didn't sound American. He sounded very ethnic in the way he talked, ethnic as in Russian. So he definitely had the inflections, if whether or not his language skills were perfect. Now, how he failed, I don't know. But, oh man, I lost track of where I am now. So that's something from the government that I think is kind of weird, that he would fail a Russian exam. And it all pertains to whether or not he had anything to do with intelligence, which we're receiving recent documents that I think are beginning to own up to the fact that he was at least briefed, debriefed, or however that is said, upon his re-entry into the United States. We don't just let him in without talking to him first and trying to establish who he was and what the hell he was doing. So I think some of the recently released documents are establishing that the government knew about Oswald, may have even known that he was a threat, but because the intelligence spectrum is so wide and because everyone has individual, rights and liberties in this country, we don't just, throw someone in jail because there's an active communist running around who defected and then came back to the United States, So it was alarming, it was inconvenient, but there's not much you can do about it. It's sort of what John F. Kennedy said with regards to assassination, that any man who's willing to trade his life is more probably going to be able to successfully pull it off. So Oswald was willing to trade his life. He appears to have almost got away with it, which is very, very peculiar. Like he slipped out of the building. I don't think people who believe he was guilty don't think that he was planning to have such a daring escape. But like I said, there's some details that still make me curious. I'll leave it at that for now, because right now I'm making the single gunman argument. Eventually, we're going to come back to why I'm still open to the conspiracy topic, and I'll show you some of the things that are still red flags for me. But Oswald's biographical history show that he approached, pro-Castro Cubans, and he also partied with, underground liberals. Ruth Payne, who was his landlord, was in fact, an underground liberal of some type. And also, when I say underground liberal, I mean, she was left-leaning in her own personal views. And like I said, birds of a feather flock together. Oswald found like-minded people to vent his, left-wing ideologies to. And when you're prosecuting him, or him in the Kennedy conspiracy, most people don't want to see Ruth Payne put on trial. I'm not saying whether or not she had anything to do with it or not, but Oswald couldn't drive, so there were people driving him. There were people doing all sorts of things around, and he was going to, parties and enjoying the company of other left-leaning communists. Now, he was not the only member of Fair Play for Cuba, and he was photographed with other, pamphleteers, so he had... he's not a complete loner, is what I'm getting at. That is one misconception that is passed off by the government, and it's passed off in so many criminal cases because they want to narrow down the people they prosecute. They don't want to send 7 people to the gallows. I forget how many. It might have been 5 or 6 people during the Lincoln assassination, because that was done, they would have wished to have spared Mary Surratt or maybe George Atzerodt, because Atzerodt, after all, he had second thoughts and chose not to execute Johnson. So, those are things like, say, legal muddy waters. But what happens is criminal cases eventually become widely accepted as absolute fact, because the prosecution depends on being right in order to convict a criminal. So whenever we have a legal case in America, whatever is determined from that case for right or wrong is admitted into the official record, and that's how we perceive history from time to time. However, problematic that may be. But history is not about what makes it into the government record. It's more about what happens. Like, I just tapped the table. That happened. It's on record. This time it's being recorded. I slapped the table. So that's something that's history. Now it happened. Other people want to use history for their own gains. They want to interpret history. I mean, they want to write history. We don't quite write history. We record history. That's what I think is the most necessary for a historian to do. And should you be objective? Should you love or hate your topics? I think that's all up for the historical reviewer to partake of as they please. So anyway, I don't even know what to title this video, but we're just making another segue into the JFK assassination, and we're going to keep going and visit a few other topics more because now my throat is feeling a little better.